Good evening, everyone. This is your host, Giselle Wilson from www.radioregent.com. We are broadcasting live through our podcast on the Net Radio Regent Network, and I am your host and co-producer of Black Wellness, our online radio show that we showcase each and every Saturday from 7 to 8 p.m. So we'd like to thank you for joining us. This month, we're talking about women and mental health, in particular, those part of the African diaspora. And tonight's show is falling in line with that theme as we talk about the politics of hair. So for those who don't know, this month we're talking about our mental health. And when it comes to Black Wellness, we support all those who provide holistic, organic services and products to the community, which would include vendors of all types, therapists, counselors, everyone who supports the wellness, the maintenance, and the well-being of the community. So tonight we have a very special guest who's calling in, and we're very happy to have her. Her name is Dr. Cheryl Thompson, and she's calling in. She is the author of the book, Beauty in a Box: Detangling the Roots of Canada's Black Beauty Culture. So she wrote this book. She's a professor at Ryerson University. And tonight we want to talk about the issues that affect those, especially with those with the kink in their hair and those who have challenges, not only in the workplace, but through education and even the business of hair. That is a very lucrative business around the world. So I am going to patch her in. One moment, everyone. Dr. Thomas, can you hear me?
Thompson.
Thompson. Oh, there we go.
Yes.
Can you hear me? Oh,
I
good.
can hear
I
you.
can hear you. Welcome to the show. This is Black Wellness. We'd like to thank you so much for your time.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Yes. So let's begin. What started you on this journey, especially when it comes to researching about the Black hair care industry in Canada and just your inspiration for writing the book?
Well, it's actually a 10-year journey.
Wow.
More longer than that. So in 2007, I decided to lock my hair, to get dreads.
Mm-hmm.
And I've used a relaxer for 15 years.
Wow.
And so, I actually did it the same time that I turned 30 because I said to myself that I really, when I was in my 20s, I was like, I didn't want to take this practice into my 30s. So I did that. And then it just happened that all these things started happening in the media at the same time. If you recall, it was either 2007 or 2008, but that was when Dawn Imus, who was that radio talk show host, had called the women's Rutgers University women's basketball team nappy-headed hoes, like on live on the air.
That was a big thing.
And I was like, okay, well, that's foolishness. So, and then a few other things started happening. And then in 2009, I started my PhD at McGill. And I'd already knew that I wanted to do the hair project, but it was really like early days. And then Chris Rock, Good Hair, came out in 2009.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just a series of events where I just said, you know what, there's all these conversations happening in the U.S. There are no conversations happening in Canada.
That's true.
Why don't I do it? And, it's funny because a friend of mine in grad school, he would always say, if you say to yourself, that no one's written about this topic, somebody should write about this topic, he would always say, well, maybe that somebody is you.
Wow.
So
it always turns into us, like if no one's doing it, we have to take ownership and responsibility. I'm really happy that you did.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's literally how it started, and then it just developed from there.
Awesome. So what perspective do you take? So you talked about taking the vantage point from the Canadian industry. How does it differ from what's happening in the States and around the world in terms of the business of hair care for Black women?
I mean, you can't really compare the U.S. to any other market because they kind of have a lock on it, right?
Literally.
Yeah, because in terms of the network, on the local level, the network of barbershops and hair salons, like it just outnumbers any other Western country, right? You compare Canada and the UK and France and all these other places.
Right.
And then on the secondary level, the number of like retail outlets and department stores, right? Like they just have so many. And then you have the big conglomerates, Riel and Procter and Gamble. So the U.S. is that beast. I mean, the difference between the U.S. and Canada is that we're basically a proxy market,
okay,
right, for them. Just like, to some extent, the UK, probably France, right? They're all like these proxy markets for the US.
right.
And that's just the reality. And so in Canada, what makes that problematic is the fact that we are so disconnected from understanding how our retail market / the local beauty salon and the barbershop, we just are very disconnected from how those networks actually work.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, we really don't know on the level, like, if you were to go to Chicago, like, they could tell you, right, like, how many barbershops on this block and how many...
they're very, like, street-oriented, getting direct to the customer.
Yeah, right? So they just have that, whereas in Canada, we're still... Even though we've had, you know, there's people who've been in business for close to 50 years. Like, I think of Azan's Beauty World that's at, like, Davenport, and I can't remember where, but that's been in business over 50 years.
Wow.
And yet, if you would have mentioned that place to people, they probably wouldn't even know what you were talking about.
Wow.
Right? Like, unless they were a customer. So we just lack that real local network that they have, that they've really cultivated in the U.S., but that's taken centuries, right, to get there.
Exactly. And speaking of which, can you give us a bit of a background? Because it seems that, you know, hair care and dealing with our hair is definitely one of the first original businesses, besides agriculture, that, you know, African Americans, African Canadians, that we kind of owned and had a lock on. What's the bit of the history of it, and how did it turn into what it is today?
Well, yeah, I mean, in the book, in chapter 5, it's a chapter that I really just focus on hair. All the other chapters are really about beauty culture. So the history of barbering, black beauty culture in the West really begins with the history of barbering. So in the 19th century, 18th into the 19th century, what you had was a lot of enslaved black men were actually called upon to be barbers for their masters.
Wow.
So they had to learn how to cut white people's hair. Right? And because they got really good at it, some of them would be sent to other plantations to do that work.
Wow.
And then eventually it became, when you had, especially by the mid-19th century, when you had sort of a movement of enslaved into the north, and then you also have populations in the north being born that had never been enslaved, right? Because they had been born in the north,
right,
where there really was, by that point, no slavery. So that becomes the business of free African-American men. But at the same time, the reason I say that is because there's been such a focus on that people forget that African-American women were also doing hair care at the same time. It's just that they might not have because of sexism in the 19th century, they weren't able to open up stores to the same extent until you get what's known as the Great Migration, which is really from around 1900, some say to around 1960, where that's post-enslavement, post-Reconstruction in the U.S., where a huge influx of African Americans are going north for work. Right? And we're talking about, this is the era when the Harlems of New York are born.
Like the Renaissance.
When like the South Side and various sides of Chicago are born in this era, where people, and then same with Detroit, same with Milwaukee, like all those states that now have historically black populations, this is when they're born. And so what is the business that you're going to do that you've been doing for generations? It's hair care.
Right.
I mean, in the 1960s, they were already writing about the fact that the two staples of African-American business is hair care and soul food. So those are really like the staples that were carried over from slavery.
That's amazing. And like they were obviously getting paid. How was the pay? Because like you said, it started off mainly servicing the Caucasian or the white market. So how was the pay, and how did it grow into kind of the profession that it is? I guess from the barber end of things, it seems like from the female market or from the beauty market, I know that in terms of distributions, things like that, we have C.J. Walker and a lot of different people who champion the distribution end of things, and they went around from block to block, from woman to woman, kind of marketing more of the product end of things. How was the pay or the rewards kind of scaled when it came to making a living?
Well, I mean, it's hard to talk about like the the early decades of the 19th century,
Right.
like how they did it exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And at first, if you're an African American male servicing your master and cutting hair, you're not being paid. That's part of your enslavement, right? So
Right.
that was free labor, right? So the main thing to think about is, like, even when you mentioned, like, Madam C.J. Walker, like, most people don't realize she did not live very long. Like, she died really young from, I don't know what it was, but it's something today she would have survived.
Okay.
But at her height, so she was born in the 1870s, the first person free in her family. And so, and she worked many jobs. She was a laundress. She did all these things. It was in the first decades of the 20th century where, and I think one of the misconceptions about Madam C.J. Walker is that she wasn't just a product seller. Like, we tend to think like that's what it was, but why the Walker system, like that's what they called it, was so successful is because it was basically, it was almost like the first she modeled it after Avon, right? And it was this idea of, we're not just selling you products, you're getting your hair done. So the hot comb, press, and curl, which was a standard in the hair salon until the chemical relaxer. Madam C.J. Walker really developed that technique of you get your hair washed, you get your hair hot combed and curled and styled, and then you leave out with the products, and then you tell a friend, and then they do the same thing. And then Madam C.J. Walker went what they called the Chitlin circuit, literally in a little motor coach. She would go through the South with different people working for her and selling the products. So it was like a pyramid scheme. So then you become like a Madam C.J. Walker agent, and you're selling the product, and then you're maybe doing hair. So she created this huge network of people who began to understand that if you did your hair and then you had the right products, then you can, quote unquote, uplift the race.
Wow, so MLM was going on back then.
Yeah, she was a literal genius. I mean, we're talking about, this is the first woman millionaire.
Yeah, I know.
For a reason.
Amazing. Well, I want to take a shift. So we talked a little bit about the business side to the beauty, the black beauty industry. And for those who don't know, we're talking about this because, it's very political, not only when it comes to the business side of things and the marketing side of things, but even just on the consumer end and us representing ourselves in various spaces, whether it's in education, the corporate workplace. You want to talk a little bit about how our hair is perceived, especially in its natural state, especially in this era where we're having like a resurgence of natural hair, where you talked about, locking your hair or having an afro or braids. How is that perceived politically, and how does that translate into our advancement in different areas, with the wider society?
Yeah, I mean, I really think it depends on the fields that you're in, right? Like today, I mean, I think there are still quote-unquote, white-collar professions,
right?
Like law firms and certain financial services where you're expected to wear business attire,
right.
And they've attached business attire with a certain type of hair, right? And then often in those professions, it's unspoken, right? Until you then show up with your hair in like two plaits or some plaited style, then suddenly they say, well, that's unprofessional. Even though it wasn't clearly stated, like no one clearly said to you beforehand what was professional and what wasn't, right?
And should that be deemed unprofessional? If that's your natural hair that, you're born with, and it's not in a state of disarray, and I know that's subjective as well. What do you think is professional? But,
to be honest, and I'm not trying to be political either, but often it is white women who are the biggest perpetrators of this comment on professional. And in these quote-unquote white-collar jobs, who they will comment, oh, your hair, what did you do with your hair today, right? Like, they will make an issue of it. It's not to say that white men won't either, but often there's this perception of what beauty looks like, and we have all been fed the same image. White women, black women, everyone is fed the same image, that it's long flowing hair, ideally to your shoulder, right? And so in these work environments, what you have is almost like people policing the boundaries of that image.
I agree. I'm coming out of the corporate world,
right?
and definitely I have had a journey. I think that many women can agree that they've had a journey of just self-discovery when it comes to negotiating your beauty and how you present yourself in the workplace. I mean, everybody has experienced the perm, the jerry curl. We've done so much to our hair to kind of integrate ourselves and to look, I don't even know if I want to use the word normal, but kind of want to look unassuming or to kind of blend in with to the environment, to the sacrifice of our health. We're actually talking about Black wellness, and when it comes to the product of perm, and I'm talking perm that straightens your hair, for those who don't know, not the perm that maybe other people, other cultures are familiar with, that puts the curl into your hair. The composition I know has changed over the years. But I know that the big product or the big ingredient that was not good, I think, is lye and what it has done. And
I talk about that a lot in the book, actually.
What are the effects of lye?
Yeah, I mean, first to begin, there's a misconception with lye and no lye. So it's actually in chapter 3 in the book where I really explain when that shift happened. Like prior to 1978. Most chemical relaxers would have been lye relaxers. Okay. And so lye is a chemical compound that is extremely toxic, right?
Yeah.
It's like, you don't want to, that's why I always tell people, if you remember Malcolm X, that scene where Malcolm had conked his hair and it was like the police showed up and he was like, there was no water.
He went into the toilet.
He went into the toilet because that thing burns, right? So most relaxers, all relaxers were like that. Then in the book I explained that there was a landmark case, an FTC ruling, that said that warnings had to be put on chemical relaxers. And so what happened was that the really big companies started to market no-lye relaxers. But initially they marketed those products as safe. Why? Because they didn't burn as much. Right?
But did they still contain the lye?
Yes. So here's the thing. So on application, that means when you're applying the chemical relaxer, unlike the lye relaxers, you had to base the hair, right? You had to put a protective cream first, and then you put the relaxer in. That's why there's even that scene in What's Love Got to Do with It, when all of Tina Turner's hair fell off. That used to happen all the time because they would forget to put the base, and then they would just apply the lye, and then it would burn off people's hair.
Oh, yeah.
So the no-lye didn't require a base, right? So this was revolutionary. That's why everybody started perming their hair, because it's so simple. You could do it at home. It's not dangerous. But here's the truth that they started to realize really in the early 2000s. So we're going on a good 30 years, 30-plus years until the research was actually being done, that the problem with no-lye relaxers is that after a while, they break down the shaft of the hair worse than a lye relaxer. So in the long term, you end up with hair that's just very brittle and won't grow. Even though on application, it's less painful on application, but in the long term, it damages your hair worse.
Wow. And I'm not sure if you know, or I'm not sure, I'm not a professional or a doctor in that sense, but is there anything that happens internally by putting not only just perm chemicals on our hair, but just even the hair care products that we use? Are there any long-term effects that you are aware of? I've heard everything from fibroids to, I don't know, I'm not even sure, that a lot of Black women are plagued with as a result of using a lot of these products over a period of time. Do you know whether or not that these are true, or what are the long-term effects physically on the body?
Well, I know for sure, researchers have, and this is again since the 2000s, the millennium has actually been an amazing period of Black hair, because it's the first time that researchers have been studying the effects of it, right? And which is scary, because think about how many people started perm in the 80s and 90s. We got a 20-year gap from use to people actually researching. So the researchers have pretty much said that yes, chemical relaxers seem to have a strong correlation between that and uterine fibroids. And also certain types of alopecia, there's one called, I think it's centrifugal. I can't remember the medical term. It's CCC.
Right.
Anyway. And so that's a type of baldness that they seem to only see in women who either use a chemical relaxer or tight braiding or long-term weave.
Any type of stress that is applied to the shaft and the base, the root of the hair.
Exactly. But in terms of the products, it's really hard to say because, there's so many black hair products. And what I wear now, I've been wearing dreads for over almost like 12 years now.
Awesome.
It's like I only use natural. Like I'm using pure black soap. Like all my products, I know what's in there. But I remember when I used to perm my hair, it's deceiving because a lot of our shampoos and conditioners, they smell really good.
Yes, they do.
Right?
But you know what? They also say that, exactly, you shouldn't really put anything on your hair or your skin that you can't eat, you know what I mean?
Yeah, but then when you look at the label, it's like all these words you can't even pronounce. So I couldn't tell you with the products. I think there was a woman who wrote a book that was about products, like all the chemicals in our products, but I don't know the extent that she looked at the black hair market.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Well, like I said, we've been through that journey. Myself, I kind of flirt with the dread thing on a crochet level. I'm trying to get adjusted, see if it's what I like. So far, I do like it. But that level of commitment for me, I am kind of not good with that. I love my afro, so sometimes I like to play with different styles. So, applying different extensions. Yeah, it is a commitment.
It is. I mean, that's why, I don't judge people on their hair care choices because someone who's had dreads for 12 years, it's like what people don't tell you about dreads. That should be my next book because your hair changes, right, as you get older, and after a while, certain products are not going to work anymore, and after a while, the locks, you have to twist them together because they're losing their strength. Like there's just a lot of things you have to do with dreads to keep them. And in some ways, it's more high maintenance, but then on other ways, it's very low maintenance, right?
Right.
It has its own conversation.
Exactly. And everything is about maintenance and making sure that, we take care of ourselves from head to toe. I want to also talk about, for those who are just tuning in, I'm talking to Dr. Cheryl Thompson by phone, and we're very happy to have her on the show. We're talking about the politics of hair, in particular the politics of black hair, and just how we function in this generation, in this environment, the history of hair, the business of black hair. You mentioned the movie that was done by Chris Rock, and he even cited in there, it's like a $97 billion industry around the world, and he charted how, in particular with the weave, how we get the weave and how it's processed and the middlemen until it gets to the North American market, and just the upsell of all of that. It's insane, right? So I wanted to talk about a little bit about the psychology. Going through what we've been through, and psychology on a level of not only hair, but I guess beauty, right? In terms of how do we feel about ourselves, going through this journey and being part of, the conventional system of beauty, what they say, I don't even know who the they are, beauty is. How's that played on the psyche of black women over the years? And is it still the same now? I know it's a loaded question.
No, I mean, I go back to the research that I did, and I remember there's a lot of articles, especially in Ebony magazine, like in the 1960s, when everybody was turning toward the Afro, right? So we're talking about, and most people don't realize the Afro as a thing was really from around 1966 to 1975, give or take. But that's like the main period for it in terms of it being promoted as an aesthetic in beauty advertising. But anyway, there was a generational divide. So you had like older people who were probably like in their 50s and 60s at that time looking at the younger generation like, these kids have lost their mind. Why are they not doing the shampoo, press, and curl?
Exactly.
Why are they not like straightening their hair? So they thought they were crazy, right? And so I think even today it's interesting because I think a lot of older black men and women still have that same belief that, if you see a younger black girl on her way to work, and again, she has like I say two plaits because I've been seeing that a lot lately, where it's like, wow, when I was younger, I never would have left the house with my hair plaited up. But I see people on their way to work now with their hair plaited up, and I think, wow, that is a huge step forward. But I could also see the older generation kind of look at them funny. like almost like they're unkept.
They're unkept,
like,
yeah.
Right? Like they're not. It's not professional, or they're not. Why would they wear their hair like that? So we have these. Beyond the Van Zandt talks about generational pathologies, and I mean that's exactly what it is. It's just the pathology that is interwoven into how we see everything, and as much as we, times have changed, we still have a little hang up when it comes to hair and what we think is presentable. And I always think on like the wedding day, right? The wedding day, how many brides are walking down the aisle? And I'm even...
That is an interesting question.
Right? I would put it to like the LGBTQ, straight, it doesn't matter how many brides walking down the aisle with their hair plaited up.
Wow. It's a movement. It says something. Like, even from like when you're thinking about the 70s and we went through that whole Black Power movement to what's going on right now and kind of celebrating, the skin that you're in, the way that you were born from head to toe, and just, it's really a statement when you're going against the grain, because the kink, it draws attention.
Yes, it does.
It definitely draws attention. Sometimes I like that. Like, when I go to work and I show my afro, the amount of tension, and it depends, right? Because sometimes when you do experience discrimination, it's so subtle, and it's like, oh, I like the way your hair was before, or it's not really overt, right? But I've gotten that, like the way your hair was before, or, oh, did you do something new, or did your hair grow? Like, but you can tell there's an overtone or an undertone to what is being said, and I don't know if it's coming out of fear or not understanding or a subtle suggestion to make a change.
Well, I mean, I could just tell you a little quick personal story that, as we've talked about, like I had an unfortunate incident, and that's caused me to be in care for the last few months, and one of my personal support workers, one day she was helping me like get dressed and stuff, and she was like, "Is that your hair?" So remember, I have dreads now, right?
Yeah.
So I'm like, "Yeah, of course it is." She's like, No. Is that all your real hair? I'm like, "It is." She said, "I don't believe you." And
straight out like that.
Straight up like that, and she's Filipino. And then I said, "No, honestly." And then I'm like, "It's my hair." And I thought to myself, wow, I mean, she's making that comment and she's shocked because she's seeing so much artificial extensions and weave and all this. And as much as I wasn't even offended, it just made me realize from the outside world looking in, I can see how it can be confusing. I can see. It doesn't make it right that she, feels the need that I even need to answer that kind of question when I'm trying to get dressed.
Well, the prevailing, like you said, the prevailing thought and notion is that our hair is unable to grow, and we can't grow it, or we don't have the volume like those with straighter textures have. But that's not really true, is it?
I mean, it depends on the black.
Depends. It's a unique experience.
Are complicated because it depends on your bloodline. It's like you can have 4 sisters in the same parents. Each one of them has a different texture.
True.
Right? Because of the bloodline and who knows what else. So that's what makes black hair complicated, because you could be family and you can't even share the same products, right? Or you can't even give the same tips because it might not even work for that person if it worked on you.
That's true.
So and I say that as in a celebration. I mean, I think there's been not enough narratives telling young black girls of how amazing that is. We are the only people on earth who have literally, each one of us is unique.
Wow.
Literally.
That's beautiful.
It is. It's like, it's kind of amazing.
It is kind of amazing. And I
think
the
only
younger people
that can really claim that on a generational level.
We can rock it in any way. And even a lot of young women right now, they're becoming huge influencers on YouTube and online and through social media, just giving tutorials on how to manage your hair, how to do various type of installations, putting on black makeup. Maybe we could even touch on that in terms of our skin, because I know that has been a journey as well in terms of the makeup industry. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I talk a lot about skincare also in the book. It's not just about hair, and skincare is even more problematic.
Oh,
skincare runs so much deeper because you know, prior to really the 1990s, the major beauty companies, skincare companies, they pretty much ignored black women.
Yeah.
Like, they were not interested. And in the book, what I talk about is, there, you know, and it's interesting because the birth of marketing, like marketing as a field has really exploded since the 1990s. And a lot of marketing is also about market research.
Right.
So it's at that moment in the 90s when they really started to do market research on demographics. And so it was the 1990 census that said, hey, at that time, the census in the U.S., meaning that African Americans were the fastest growing minority population at I think it's like 13% of the population, and also they were the fastest growing population of that key demographic. It was like 25 to 44 or something like that, with disposable income.
Oh.
So for the first generation of African Americans, there was this college-educated group of people who had disposable income. And so it's in that moment in the 1990s where suddenly the Maybelline and the L'Oreal and the Revlon, they were like, we have an untapped market, we need to go after it. And so they went after it, but it's really problematic because the shades, and yes, they were offering more diverse shades, but the names of the lipsticks and the eyeshadow was like cocoa or like shades of Tanzania, like just the most like exoticization of a group of people. Like everything was either about food or Africa, basically, or the jungle. It was, I think there was like a jungle blend.
The savage type of stereotype.
So it was like they were coming at it hard, but it was really othering, and like you really felt that this was not genuine. And at the same time, from beginning in really the 1960s, that you had like Fashion Fair Cosmetics, for example. Most people don't realize that Fashion Fair Cosmetics was the first black cosmetics to be sold at department stores, not just in the U.S., but also in Canada.
Yeah, I remember that when they used to be at the Bay. I used to get them at the Bay, and it was amazing. I would just like beeline it straight there to get our products because it was just like, it was revolutionary. It's like, what? There's actually something for us?
Exactly. So the African Americans who owned the skincare products, they really put love and care. It's almost like compared to what Rihanna's products, skincare line, right? They are really trying to uplift, whereas the mainstream selling black beauty products, I mean, I don't consider myself to be dark-skinned. I mean, I'm somewhere in the middle.
Right.
And I go into Shoppers Drug Mart and I can't find foundation. Like, there's no, it's like I don't even match. Like, I'm too dark for the foundation that they're selling.
I know, and then the ones that they do sell, they eliminated, like, I used to wear Fashion Fair, like, many moons ago, and then I switched to Iman, and I would flirt around with Opal, and then I'm like, okay, so I'm going into, like you said, Shoppers, because I want my points and stuff like that, and they used to have something called Cover FX, which I think was designed for cancer patients, and they actually had a range that went to where my skin tone color was, and then recently, I guess they sold the company. It's no longer at Shoppers, so now it's at Sephora. And originally at Shoppers, it was like $35, let's say, for like foundation plus tax, but then you get your discount. At Sephora, it's almost like $50. So even if they do have it, there's an expense along with it. And the expense of black beauty is a lot.
Yeah, it's like a black tax.
Yeah.
It's legit. It's a black tax.
Like even doing our hair. Like I just want people, our listeners, to appreciate what black hair and black beauty is on an investment level. Like, can we quantify that? Like, what does that mean on an investment level, on a monthly level, on an annual level?
I mean, when you wear dreads, it's like, I wear dreads and I also do my hair myself.
Right.
Like, I was going to a salon for a while, but then it closed down, and then I was like, you know what, let me learn to do this, because I just wanted to be able to care for myself, basically. So for me, I'm out the game. I'm low maintenance, right? Maybe I'm spending $100 a year on hair care products, right? Like, that's
That's the low end.
That's the very, very low end. But if we're talking about, like, you got that lace front wig that you get tightened and you're replacing, I wouldn't surprise me if women are spending anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000 a year. Like, that would be reasonable.
Wow. Well, it's true because, like, when you go into the beauty stores, like Beauty Supply, Warehouse, and all these different stores, I mean, they're constantly full. On any given day of the week, you will see the aisles are full. And I mean, from the wig section all the way down to the hair care product section, to the extensions, it's just everywhere. It's just, like, full of women. And talk about a political environment, you know.
I know.
I'm going to touch it.
And it's also, you have to remember, why is it so much? Because it's the price of the hair, but then it's the labor cost for someone to do it for you, and then it often takes hours. So how much, right? And then the maintenance in the month to buy the product or whatever it is. There's just a lot. That's why I'm out the game, because for me, I thought to myself, you know what, I'm an academic. I'm thinking all the time, I don't have time anymore to invest in this level of commitment for hair. Like, it was just, like, even in my 20s, it was just becoming like a burden almost.
But it's
like,
true.
You're always having to think about all this. Oh, I gotta get this relaxer, and I gotta get this product, and oh, I can't swim. You know, you're spending so much mental energy on it that it was just taken over.
There is a movie on Netflix that I'm like a binge watcher, and I watched Nappily Ever After. I don't know if you've ever seen it.
Yeah, I saw it. I loved it.
I thought it was amazing because it really charted the experience of black hair, especially for women, and how it's passed down generationally. You touched a bit about that, on how our parents feel or our foreparents felt in comparison to us, right? So I thought it was just amazing, the journey that she went through, and just the realization that she came to at the end of who she really was. Right, as a person beyond
and also
the hair.
what she lost, right? Like, she had to come to terms with that she was going to lose some things that were probably not going to come back.
Exactly. And like, how do we feel about men and how they see, like, even just black men and how they see us?
I mean, no, it's huge. It really is huge. And I can tell you, I remember once I went out with a friend. There was two of us, and I had dreads and her hair was natural. And we were sitting behind this black guy who was dating a white woman.
Right.
And the minute we sat down, like, he looked back and he saw us. And I thought, okay, hi. He didn't say hi. But anyway, within seconds, his hands were in the white woman's hair. Like, just stroking it. And I thought, wow, okay. Like, is that a signal? Like, it felt like a signal, like, this is why I'm with her, or I can't do this with you, or I don't know. It was just something about it was really uncomfortable, and I thought, well, that makes sense. I mean, I think we've all bought in. Think about the commercials. I know, especially in the 80s, they were hitting it hard with those shampoo commercials, right? And everybody, like, coming out and putting their hand through their hair, right? Like, I just remember as a kid, like, that left a psychological, like, stain on me, like, right, of always having that sensation of putting your hand through your hair. And, you know, we can't really do that if we're natural. Even with dreads, it's not going to quite feel the same, right?
Exactly. So, it's almost like that level of conditioning throughout the 70s and the 80s. Like, I still am a comic book buff. And even if you had, like, a black superhero, she would have, like, long hair. So if you're dealing with Storm or any of those type of characters. So for me, when I was a kid, and I used to actually love Wonder Woman. And by the way, there was, like,
Wonder Woman.
I loved Wonder Woman. Back in the day, there was, like, a black Wonder Woman. We'll get into that later. But, you know, all the hair was, like, straight. So I would put, like, a towel on my head, and I'd be jumping off my bed as a kid, and I had my rope and just pretending and wishing to have that type of hair.
Did you do the towel?
I literally put the towel on my head.
Yeah,
and I'm jumping and acting like I'm Wonder Woman, like I'm crazy.
Yeah, I know.
And then I would go into the kitchen for my mom to straighten my hair for the next week for school. You know what I mean? So it was just like you said, it was a process. It was our beauty regime, and it was just done on a level that, you know, we just had to do it, and we didn't even realize the effects and the impression that it was making.
No, we didn't. But, you know, the deeper issue as it relates to men is that, you know, you hear, I mean, this has never happened to me, but you hear stories where, you know, men will say to their black girlfriends, oh, you're going to do something with your hair. Meanwhile, it's like, honey, her hair is your hair. Like, you know that her hair is really the same texture as yours, right? Like, so there's also, like, some kind of psychic thing going on with black men where it's like somehow they have disconnected that we have the same hair.
Right. It's so true.
We come from the same roots.
Well, men, that is a good one. We come from the same roots. Your hair is my hair. It just takes more time to prepare. And I think that's what it is. Men are visual, right? So they're seeing us one way in public, and then behind closed doors, it's another. And for them, it's like two impressions. You know what I mean? Like, even for my husband, he loves my natural hair. But when we were dating, it was hilarious because he never saw it. So like every time he saw me, I had a wig or something.
Yeah, it's true.
It wasn't who I quote unquote really was, or the real me, or whatever you want to call it, until we got married, and there was no choice because we're living in the same space.
Yeah, you cannot keep that up for 20
I can't keep
years.
Exactly. So it's like, oh, my hair is kinky, the gig is up. So
yeah, exactly. Divorce.
So yeah, divorce. He stayed for a bit. So talking about, our impression, we've talked about so much. What's the overall consensus of this, dealing down from, are we still have hang-ups with our hair? Are we still, like, what do we take from all of this in the millennium, in 2019? I'm assuming we're over it. We're celebrating uniqueness. There's so many mixed races out there, you know what I mean? So there's so many different textures of hair, from super kinky all the way down to straight. How do we examine and penetrate all of this?
Yeah, I think the younger generation is definitely at a better place than us, because again, if you're of a certain age, like especially 40s and 50s, we are the chemical generation, where we were just sold this thing so hard that everybody had some kind of chemical in their hair, right?
True.
And then even those women who are maybe in their 30s, they're the weave generation. So it's like pure weave. If you're a teenage girl today or in your early 20s, it's like you've seen all those styles and the negative effects.
Right.
So you have so much more information to say to yourself, Mommy, I don't want to relax my hair. Like when you're choosing, like, I don't even want that. Right? You're making a conscious choice. Whereas my own era, I was like, as soon as I could, I want to relax her. Please get me one. I want my hair to be straight. It wasn't even an option that I wouldn't want my hair to be straight. So I think you have these like competing narratives that are circulating today, where there's a lot of young black girls that feel like they don't need to do that. They don't need to do the things that we did. And at the same time, you have some of us of a certain age waking up to the fact that maybe we don't need to wear that weave to go to work. Maybe we'll actually be accepted if we just take a chance and wear the hair that we want to wear, right? Because there's a lot of women who wear weave not because they want to, it's because they're a little bit afraid that if they really don't, then they might lose their job, or they might lose the man, or whatever they might lose. It just is a matter of courage. We live in an era where collectively we're encouraged to have courage.
That's true.
Right?
It's a real phobia, and that's a real message.
Yeah, like we can really take the steps as an individual that a century ago black people could not do as individuals. They needed a collective. That's why when people say, oh, there's no more leaders anymore. Yeah, because we don't need collective movements anymore. We as individuals need to make the movement every single day. Like, that's why.
Awesome.
Right? And I think people haven't made that connection. That's where we're at. It's actually a very liberating place. It's not a bad place at all.
That's amazing, and that is so true. It's about making your own personal statement and living your own truth. We're so exposed with social media and the internet, you know what I mean? So everything is like completely online, and we're seeing so many different types of people, and we keep redefining beauty and professionalism every single day by just being who we are. You know what I mean?
It's true. It's really true.
And how do you see the industry evolving in Canada in terms of the beauty and hair industry for black textured hair?
Well, I think I'm more optimistic when I see the sole proprietor trying to sell products outside of major retail. Like, I think, one of the one of the ways in which the African-American black beauty culture industry grew, like I said, Madam C.J. Walker, was that she did it on her own in her own network, right? And I think in Canada, we have an opportunity to do that and not think, oh, I got to get my product into Shoppers or Sephora or the Bay. Why?
True.
There's so many ways that you can market to your own community without having to go into the major retail to do that. And so I'm encouraged when I go to, like, for example, I always go to the X every year, and I was really, like, the international building is where they have all the vendors. I was really shocked to see how many black business owners had a booth.
Really?
At the X this past year.
Wow.
2018. I was shocked, and they were selling products.
Wow.
Right? Like their own products with labels, and they had business cards, really professional, and there was someone there to demonstrate it. I had never seen that before. There was at least 3 or 4 booths that were like a serious product line, not just like 1 or 2 products. It was a product line that they were selling, and it was all local businesses.
That's amazing.
Honestly, that was a good signal to me that something is shifting, where we're starting to realize that we can make our own and sell our own products. We don't have to rely on the big business, or they used to call it like big pharma, basically, to like come in and sell to us. We don't need that. So there's a lot of encouraging things happening on the ground.
That's amazing. Truly. That's amazing. Yeah. I have a couple of final questions. We started off talking about barbers. So we're talking about how the hair movement actually started off with barbers and the black barbers grooming white men in the South, things like that. What do you think about the licensing? Now, I think recently barbers have to be licensed. What does that mean? What do you think about that?
Well, first of all, in Ontario, barbers are not really considered barbers. They're considered under hairdressers. So they actually are very limited. That's another side issue. But I think, even in my book, it's like, I say it at the very end, who is going to write the book about black barbers in Canada? Like, that is the book that needs to be written.
Let me tell you.
Because as much as I talk about it, I've stepped into a barbershop twice in my life.
Really?
Okay? Really, truly.
Wow.
I've been in a barbershop twice. So it's like, what can I really say about this amazing institution that I think has really serviced a lot, especially in the GTA? And I'm sure same goes in Africville and Halifax and North Preston and all those communities where there's historical black communities. And same goes in Edmonton, right? Across the country where there are black people, the barbershop has to be this institution that nobody's written about.
Wow, I would love to co-author that with you, Black Wellness. No, seriously, because I have a son and a brother. I've been in tons of barbershops, and it's a world of its own. Just like,
it is a world of difference.
Yeah, that's where you get your counseling. That's where the men get to talk and chat. It's almost like the
Cut
same.
Their jokes.
Let me tell you, it's almost like the same vibe as like playing dominoes. Like they get to go there and kind of jam and be free. They watch their sports games. They get to mentor young people. They get to do their hair tattooing.
They need to start telling that story because a lot of these older barbers are closing up shop, right?
Yep.
And it's a different generation of barber that's replacing them. So all those old stories going back 40 years are going to be lost if somebody doesn't recognize the need to start telling that story, because I think it's a rich story that just hasn't really been told.
Definitely rich story. There's the part 2. Wow, that's amazing. Thank you so much for your volume of information. For those who are listening, we're talking with Dr. Cheryl Thompson, and she wrote a book called Beauty in a Box, Detangling the Roots of Canada's Black Beauty Culture. She has her doctorate, she has a PhD, and she is a professor at Ryerson University here in Toronto. And we've been talking about the politics of hair, especially black hair. It's been an amazing conversation. I've learned so much. I've kind of went back in time.
Yeah, I can't believe the hour is over.
The hour is like almost over. And for those who've been listening in, I think you got a treat tonight. It will be published right now. We're live. We're podcasted live on www.radioregent.com, and then we will be featuring the rebroadcast on our social media at Support Black Wellness Now on Facebook. So we'll be doing the podcast there because we are talking remotely. with Dr. Thomas. So you can get the rebroadcast on social media, so stay tuned to that. And for those who have any questions, you can email us anytime at blackwellnessworldwide@gmail.com. That's blackwellnessworldwide@gmail.com. I'm Giselle Wilson. I am your host, and this is co-produced with Lori Beezer. We have a movement called Black Wellness, where we feature all things that help our wellness in terms of organic maintenance, in terms of our culture, in terms of our mind, our body, and our community. So please stay tuned to us each and every Saturday here on Radio Regent. We'll be coming to you live. Next week we'll be having, we're going to be talking about our emotional health. We're going to be talking about the stereotype angry black woman, seeing what people think about that, and seeing whether it's true or not, and seeing how do we get our emotions more in check. So once again, thank you so much, Dr. Thompson, for your time and for being with us. It was a pleasure speaking with you.
No, thank you for having me.
Yes, no problem. We will continue the conversation next week for our listening audience. Take care and have a great evening. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.